The wind moved across the plains like a weary traveler searching for home. It carried the taste of snow and smoke, brushing over the fences that leaned tired against the earth. Somewhere near the edge of Wyoming, a small town slept under its white blanket, unaware that two lives would soon meet there and never part again. She came walking through that wind, a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, her dark hair carrying bits of frost. Her name was Feather, named not for her lightness but for her strength. A feather bends in a storm, but it never breaks. People in town spoke her name like a curse, soft and sharp at once. They didn't see her the way the land did. To them she was a half-shadow, a half-blood, a woman out of place. But the earth knew her. The wind followed her steps as if it recognized her courage. Feather lived alone in a cabin just beyond the last row of houses, where the grass met the snow and the silence was kinder than people. She mended things for a living, saddles, boots, torn jackets. Each stitch she made felt like a prayer, a quiet way of holding the world together when it wanted to fall apart. The nights that winter were cruel. The storms howled without rest and the roads turned to ice. It was during one such night that the cowboy came. He rode into town through the storm like a ghost on a tired horse. The saloon doors swung open and a man stepped in, shaking snow from his coat. His face was worn, his beard rough, his eyes tired like the end of a long journey. They said his name was Luke. No one knew where he came from or what he'd lost, only that he didn't speak much and didn't stay long anywhere. That first night he saw her. She was standing outside the mercantile, her arms full of fabric and thread. The wind tore one spool from her hand, rolling it into the snow. Luke bent down, caught it and handed it back to her. Their eyes met, hers steady, his uncertain. "You fix things," he said, more statement than question. Feather nodded. "It's what I do." He paused as if the words reached deeper than they should have. "Maybe you can fix something for me too." She thought he meant a saddle, maybe a glove. But his tone was softer, almost pleading, as if something in him was cracked open and he didn't know how to close it again. He came to her cabin the next morning with a torn bridle and a few coins. She worked quietly as he stood by the fire, his hands awkward, eyes tracing the walls filled with her tools and old keepsakes. "You live out here alone?" he asked. Feather smiled faintly. "Not alone. The wind keeps me company." He chuckled under his breath. "The wind doesn't talk much. It says enough if you listen." For a long while neither spoke. The needle moved in her fingers, the fire sighed in the hearth, and the snow outside kept falling, soft, endless, patient. When she handed him the mended bridle, he noticed her hands, small, rough, strong. He wanted to say thank you but found no words that seemed worthy. That night, he left a small feather tied to her door with a leather cord. She found it in the morning and smiled, though she didn't know why. Days turned to weeks. The snow deepened. Luke stayed. He took work fixing fences, chopping wood, helping where he could. The townsfolk didn't trust him, just as they never trusted her. Yet somehow, the two outcasts found comfort in each other's silence. Sometimes after work, he'd come by her cabin, bring her coffee beans or dried meat, small offerings that said more than words. She'd boil water, pour 2 cups, and they'd sit by the fire as the wind whispered against the windows. Once he told her about the ranch he'd lost and the brother who died trying to save it. His voice cracked like old timber. "I walked away," he said. "Couldn't stay where everything reminded me." Feather looked into the fire. Walking away doesn't mean running. Sometimes it means surviving. He stared at her then as if seeing her for the first time, not the woman the town ignored, but the soul that had learned to endure without bitterness. Their closeness was not born of passion but of peace, two wounded hearts learning the rhythm of quiet healing. But peace in towns like Larkspur was fragile. Whispers began to crawl through the streets like snakes. A native woman and a white cowboy. "Shame," they said. One night in the saloon, a drunk ranch hand spat her name like poison. Luke's fist found the man's jaw before the insult was finished. Bottles shattered. The piano stopped. By the time the sheriff pulled him off, Luke's knuckles were bleeding, and the town had already judged them both. Feather heard the commotion from her cabin. When she saw him stumbling toward her through the snow, bruised and shaking, she pulled him inside without a word. The fire glowed soft as she cleaned his wounds. His eyes followed her hands, the way they moved without fear, without hesitation. "You shouldn't have fought for me," she murmured. He smiled weakly. "Wasn't fighting for you. Was fighting for what's right." Feather shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "Right and wrong mean little in a town that's forgotten its own heart." He watched her for a long time. Then he said the words he didn't know he'd been carrying. "I'm not perfect, Feather. I've done things I can't forgive myself for. But I'll give you the kind of love that heals, if you'll let me. Her hands stilled. The world outside went quiet, even the wind holding its breath. When she spoke, it was not with hesitation but with truth. Then we'll heal each other. From that night on, they were no longer two strangers surviving winter. They were something the world could not define, a man and woman choosing gentleness in a place that had forgotten how. The storms grew worse. Snow piled high against the doors. But their fire never went out. Together they rebuilt the fences, mended the roof, shared stories that belonged to no one else. Spring tried to come but winter lingered, stubborn as grief. Then one evening, as the sky burned gold behind the mountains, Luke took her hand. He didn't kneel. He didn't speak fancy. He just said, "Stay with me. Not because you have to. Because you want to." Feather smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I've stayed my whole life in places that didn't want me. I think it's time I stay somewhere that does." They married beneath the old oak at the edge of town. No preacher, no crowd, just the wind, the snow melting at their feet, and two hearts making promises too simple to break. By next winter they had built a home together. A real one with walls strong enough to keep out more than just the cold. But peace never came easy in Larkspur. One night the church bell rang, fire in the north fields. Luke saddled his horse without a thought. Feather followed on foot through the storm, breath burning, heart pounding. The barn near the ridge was already half aflame. Inside, trapped animals cried out. Luke disappeared into the smoke before she could stop him. The world went red and wild. She ran after him, covering her face with her shawl. The heat seared, the air screamed. She found him near the stalls, pulling open gates, shouting for her to stay back. She didn't. Together they led the horses out one by one. When the last gate opened, the roof groaned above them. He pushed her clear just before it fell. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence and falling ash. Then he stumbled out, coughing, holding her close. She was alive. Burned, bruised, but alive. Snow began to fall, soft, slow, pure, as if the sky itself was weeping with relief. He held her in his arms, their faces streaked with soot and tears. She whispered against his chest, "You see? Even fire can't take what's meant to stay." He kissed her hair, voice trembling. "You heal everything you touch." She smiled faintly. "Not everything. But enough." When the flames finally died, they stood hand in hand, watching the smoke rise like a prayer into the night. Years later, folks in Larkspur would still speak of them. The woman who fixed what others broke and the cowboy who learned how to stay. Their cabin stood through every storm, its chimney forever smoking, a small light glowing in the window long after the world outside turned dark. And if you passed by on a cold night, you might hear a song drifting through the wind, soft, wordless, the kind of tune that carries both pain and peace. Some say it was just the wind. Others swear it was love itself still singing in the snow.